So, who exactly was Jesus of Nazareth? It's a question that has, literally shaped world history. Today, we're going to go straight to the source, the New Testament, to really unpack the powerful and pretty complex portrait it paints of its central figure. Let's dive right in. You know, the four Gospels, that's Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, they're not just simple biographies. They're making some absolutely huge claims about Jesus' identity. So, the big question for our explainer today is this. When you read what they wrote, who were the authors themselves claiming he really was? Okay, so to answer that question, the Gospels actually start in a place you might not expect. They don't frame Jesus as the start of some brand new religion. Instead, they present him as the grand finale, the climax of Israel's long and ancient story. And this is so key. The big idea here is that you just can't understand Jesus in a vacuum. The gospel writers are basically arguing that his entire identity is woven into the history, the prophecies, and all the promises of the Old Testament. He's the one in whom that whole story finally makes complete sense. Think of it like this. The Old Testament has all these huge, sweeping story arcs. You've got the theme of a new creation, a new exodus from slavery, the hope for a new covenant with God, the question of who the people of God are, and this idea of humanity as God's image. Well, the Gospels claim that all of these threads, every single one, they all come together and find their resolution in this one person, Jesus. And Matthew's Gospel just wastes zero time making this point. The very first verse, boom, links Jesus right back to two of the most important figures in Jewish history, King David, the promised messianic king, and Abraham, the father of the whole covenant. The author is basically screaming at you, hey, to get Jesus, you have to start with this story. But of course, the Gospels don't just stop there. They build from this idea of Jesus as the climax of Israel's story to their most radical, most stunning claim, that he wasn't just a man in history, but that he actually shared in the very identity of God. So, the Gospel of John opens with these incredible cosmic words. He's deliberately echoing the very first line of the entire Bible, in the beginning. But now, the creative force behind everything is called the Word. This is setting the stage for a massive, massive reveal. Then the verse continues, and it creates a little bit of separation. This word, it's not just some impersonal force, it's a being, in a unique face-to-face relationship with God. But John's not done yet. And there it is, the climax of the entire thought. It doesn't say the word was like God or a God. No, it makes a direct statement of identity. The word was God. And a few lines later, John tells us this word became flesh. That's Jesus. So from the get-go, John is equating Jesus with the one God of Israel. It's a bombshell. We really have to stop and think about how shocking this would have been. These early Christians were devout Jews. Monotheism was everything to them. There was only one God, period. Worshipping anyone or anything else was the ultimate sin, idolatry. And yet, here they are, including Jesus inside their very definition of who that one God is. It was nothing short of a theological earthquake. And John's intro wraps up with this powerful summary. The claim is that the invisible God, the one nobody has ever seen, has been perfectly and fully revealed in Jesus. If you want to know what God is like, the gospel argues you look at him. Simple as that. Okay, but the Gospels don't just, say all this stuff. They show it. And that brings us to the third key piece of this portrait, how Jesus' authority is put on display through his actions. This is such a clever literary technique the writers use. Jesus' miracles aren't just random acts of power. They are very carefully chosen actions that, if you know your Old Testament, you know are things only God himself does. They are, in a way, acted out identity claims. Just look at this breakdown. In the Old Testament, it's clear. Only God can forgive sins. But then, in Mark's Gospel, Jesus looks at a paralyzed man and just says, your sins are forgiven. And this causes a total uproar. The religious leaders are thinking, wait a minute, who can forgive sins but God alone? Or how about this? The Psalms say only God can command the sea, and yet Jesus stands up in a boat, speaks to a raging storm, and it goes completely calm. And maybe the biggest one of all, worship is for God and God alone. But after his resurrection, what do his followers do? They worship him. Do you see? The Gospels are constantly showing Jesus doing things that only God does. All right, Finally, to really get the full picture, we have to decode the specific titles that the Gospels use for Jesus. These names were loaded with meaning for the original audience, but that meaning is often really different from what we might think today. This table is super helpful. Let's take Messiah. The popular expectation was for this powerful military king who's going to kick out the Romans. But the Gospels completely redefine it. He's a king, all right, but a king who suffers to save people from sin. Or look at Son of Man. Sometimes it just means human, but when Jesus uses it, he's referring to this divine, exalted figure from the book of Daniel, who, and here's the twist, must also suffer. And Son of God, which could just mean Israel's king, gets elevated to describe a unique, one-of-a-kind divine relationship with God the Father. In every case, they take a familiar title and pour this new, completely unexpected meaning into it. So let's bring it all together. The New Testament's portrait of Jesus isn't flat or simple. It's this incredibly rich, complex tapestry woven from all these different threads. He's the climax of Israel's entire story. He's the visible expression of the invisible God. His divine authority is demonstrated in his actions, and his mission completely redefines what it even means to be a Messiah or a king. And that kind of leaves us with a final thought to chew on. This multi-layered portrait, this blend of history and theology, wasn't just some abstract idea, it became the very cornerstone of a global faith. And it raises a really fascinating question. What does it mean when a story about who a person is becomes completely inseparable from a claim about the nature of God himself? Thanks for watching.